smoking hash and marijuana, studying sometimes Indian philosophy, sometimes simply pretending that they study. And they greatly annoyed Indian police, and they were laughing stock of Indians because obviously they were good-for-nothing students. I studied carefully where they congregate, what routes they travel, what language they speak, what do they smoke. And one day I simply joined a group of hippies to avoid detection of Indian police. I was dressed as a typical hippie with blue jeans, long camise shirts, with all kind of nice decorations like beads, long hairs. I bought a wig because for several weeks I had to turn myself from a conservative Soviet diplomat into a very progressive American hippie. And that was the only way that I could avoid detection. It was very interesting experience, but it was necessary because from my own knowledge as a member of Soviet embassy staff, I knew that there were many cases when Soviet defectors were betrayed by Indian police, and also some Western embassies played a very dirty role in betraying the Soviet defectors. According to our information, they were some, I wouldn't call them double agents, but simply immoral people working for this for the United States Embassy, and confiding in people like this would be a suicide. So I had to be extremely careful. I could not trust anyone, and that was the reason for such a crazy way to defect.
Well, had you been caught in the act of trying to get out, what would have happened to you?
Oh, most likely I would end up in concentration camp. Or, depending on the situation and on the whim of some bureaucrat in KGB, maybe even executed. This is normal practice. Quietly, of course, not publicly. But that would be the end of my defection, of course.
Well, when did you finally make it to the United States?
In 1970, after about 6 months of debriefing in Athens by the CIA, and I presume FBI too, they let me go first to Germany, then to Canada. That was my decision. I had to change my identity to protect my family and my friends in USSR. And also I was a little bit paranoid knowing that both Soviet KGB and probably some double agents within American system may be after me. So I wanted to settle down as far away as possible. I requested CIA to give me some kind of new identity and just let me go on my own. And I settled in Canada. I was a student. I changed many professions, from farm help and laundry truck driver to language instructor and broadcaster for Canadian Broadcasting Corporations in Montreal.
Well, have you had any threats on your life or any unpleasant?
In about 5 years, KGB eventually discovered that I am working for Canadian Broadcasting. I made a very big mistake. I started working for overseas service of CBC, which is similar to Voice of America, in Russian language. And of course, monitoring service in USSR picked up every new voice. Every new announcer they would make it a point to discover who he is. And in 5 years, sure enough, slowly but surely, they discovered that I am not Thomas Schumann, that I am Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov, and that I am working for Canadian Broadcasting, and undermining beautiful détente between Canada and USSR. And the Soviet ambassador Alexander Yakovlev made it his personal effort to discredit me. He complained to Pierre Trudeau, who is known to be a little bit soft on socialism. And the management of CBC behaved in a very strange, cowardly way, unbecoming to representatives of an independent country like Canada. They listened to every suggestion that Soviet ambassador gave, and they started shameful investigation, analyzing content of my broadcasts to USSR. Sure enough, they discovered that some of my statements were probably would be offending to the Soviet Politburo. So I had to leave my job. And of course, subtle intimidations. They would say something like, please cross the street carefully because, you know, traffic is very heavy in Quebec. And fortunately, I know about the psychology and the logic of activity of the KGB, and I never allowed myself to be intimidated. This is the worst thing. This is what they expect a person, a defector, to be intimidated. Once they spot that you are scared, they keep on developing that line, and then eventually you either have to give up entirely and work for them, or they neutralize you. They would definitely stop all kind of political activity, which they failed to do in my case, because I was stubbornly working for the Canadian Broadcasting. And in response to their intimidations, I said that, look, this is a free country, and I am as free as you are. And I also can drive very fast. And gun control is not yet established in Canada, so I had a couple of good shotguns in my basement. So welcome to visit me someday with your Kalashnikov's machine guns. So obviously it didn't work. Intimidation didn't work. So they tried different approach, as I described. They approached on the highest level, on the level of Canadian bureaucracy.
And at that level they were
successful. On that level they were successful. On individual level they failed flat.
Mr. Bezmenov has brought a series of slides with him that he has taken from the Soviet Union, and I think this is a good time to take a look at the slides.
Yes.
Now, the viewers will be able to see these slides as we talk about them.
Yes, this is a collection of slides which are, some of them are snapshots from my family album, some of them are documents which I smuggled from the Soviet embassy, and some are reproductions from local mass media. I usually show them to establish my credibility as a defector. This is a picture of my native town, Mytishi, about 20 miles north from Moscow. Characteristically, there is a statue of Comrade Lenin in the central square. This is myself at the age of 7, again, characteristically, under the statue of Comrade Stalin, extending his friendly hand to peoples of the world. At that age, of course, I was still idealistically minded young communist, and I still believe that sooner or later things will go for better. But I realized that the system stinks, that something is fishy, and that ideology is fake. And the propaganda about advanced Soviet agriculture simply didn't meet the criteria of reality. If they talk about abundance of food and there is none in the stores, there must be something wrong. My father was, he is on the left here, my father was officer of the General Staff of the Soviet Army. He was inspector of land forces, Soviet troops stationed in countries like Mongolia, Cuba, East European countries. Were he alive today, most likely he would be inspecting Soviet troops in Nicaragua, Angola, and many other parts of the world. Fortunately, he died and he didn't see the disgrace, because deep inside he was a Russian patriot. He didn't like the idea of expanding Soviet military might, especially in the areas where we were not welcomed at all. Unlike many other military officers, he was reporting directly to the Minister of Defense, bypassing KGB and diplomatic service. In other words, he was a trusted military professional. And my impression that this type of people are much less hawkish and adventuristic than party bureaucrats in Kremlin. When American mass media describes Soviet military as potentially dangerous counterpart for Pentagon, I simply laugh, because I know better. I know that the most dangerous part of the Soviet power structures are not military at all. Most likely, if they come to power in my country, they'll be more sensible negotiators for nuclear disarmament and withdrawal of the Soviet troops from many parts of the world.
But if someone from the party structure or the KGB structure were to give the orders for a military
intervention, they have to obey,
they would follow,
because they are professional military. But they, you see, the triangle of power and hate in USSR is the party at the top, the party elite, the oligarchy of the party, then the military, and the KGB at the bottom. They hate each other. And the most hated triangle, the most hated corner of the triangle is the Communist Party bureaucrats. They are the most adventuristic, senile megalomaniacs. They can start war. I wouldn't be surprised. Not the military. They know what war is.
Yes.
At least my father did. This is the picture taken at the entrance of my Institute of Oriental Languages. It's a part of Moscow State University. I graduated in 1963. And
now, excuse me, which one were you on?
I am on the right.
You're on the right.
And on the left is my my schoolmate Vadim Smirnov, who later was a apparatchik in the Central Committee of the Soviet Union Communist Party.
What is an apparatchik?
It's a functionary, something like civil service in British Empire. Someone who is never fired from the service. He stays there internally. He may not be promoted too high, but he's a dependable bureaucrat who will stay forever. I studied not only languages but also history, literature, even music. I'm on this picture. I'm trying to learn how to play Indian musical instrument. I even tried to look like an Indian when I was second-year student.
Not bad, really.
Yes, actually, it was strongly encouraged by the instructors in my school, because the graduates of my school were later on employed as diplomats, foreign journalists, or spies. As every Soviet student, I was quote-unquote volunteering for harvesting grain in Kazakhstan. This is the biggest agricultural blunder of the Soviet government. But I didn't have much choice, of course, because the communist motto borrowed from the Bible says, "Those who do not work shall not eat." And you can see me eating, therefore I was working, and you can see how happy I was about it. I went through a very extensive physical and military training, including the military games in areas, suburban areas of Moscow. And here, for example, we are on a tour in Arkhangelsk area. And by the end of my training in school, I was recruited by the KGB. This picture was taken on that day, and you can see again how happy it feels to be recruited by the KGB.
Our conversation with Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov, who is a defector from the Soviet Union, a former propaganda agent for Novosti and the KGB, will continue after this message.
As every student in USSR, I went through very extensive physical and military training and civil defense training too. Unlike in the United States, where civil defense is virtually non-existent, zero. In USSR, every student, whatever his major subject, has to go through very extensive 4-year military and civil defense training. You can see me here with a group of students during one of the war games near Moscow. The main idea, of course, is to prepare a huge reserve army of the USSR. Each student has to graduate as a junior lieutenant. In my case, it was administrative and military intelligence service. My first assignment was to India as a translator with the Soviet Economical Aid Group, building refinery complexes in Bihar state and Gujarat state. At that time, I was still naively, idealistically believing that what I was doing contributes to the understanding and cooperation between the nations. It took me quite a number of years to realize that what we were bringing to India was a new type of colonialism, 1,000 times more oppressive and exploitative.